Good morning. How's everybody?
Good.
I know you're going to be heartbroken, but I'm gonna have to let you go early today because my aunt is in the hospital. She had to be taken there last night. So I have to run and check on her because I think they're gonna release her at about 10 o'clock today. So I know that that's gonna make you wanna cry because you're not gonna see me on Thursday either because Thursday is it's Thursday. Thanksgiving, so you all will be eating turkey and spending time with your friends, family, and loved ones,
And you're
hopefully.
in that room at the end.
But I that means that you don't get the pleasure of my company for, that day either. So, we're gonna start talking about professional selling today. And then we'll finish the semester with professional selling. So, find my PowerPoint. It's not working. There we go. Launch that. So, professional sales. We have one of a very few professional sales programs in the nation. And we have a award-winning sales team. So if you are interested in this, this is the part of marketing that I really enjoy. I am one of the coaches. I'm the primary coach for our professional sales team. And we travel all over the country going to sales competitions. We do about 8 competitions a year. It's one of these things that I highly encourage you to think about. A lot of people say that they want to get a business degree because they know that they want to make money, because if you get out and you have a degree, I have lots of students that I've met over the years. And when I was a political science professor, lots of students that I knew that came through and were doing things like getting a major in musical theater. And there's just not a lot of jobs in musical theater out there. However, a lot of those skills that you develop in musical theater, the ability to present, the ability to sort of be on stage, are applicable to the sales field. None of our sales majors, as far as I know, this last year, we reached the first year with 100% making over 6 figures in their first year out of college. So there are not a lot of careers that you can go into and say that you're going to make $100,000. All of our sales majors and our sales minors have jobs. We have 100% placement of our sales majors and our sales minors. So it's a profession that you should seriously consider. But most people say when I talk about sales, they think, about selling cars at Jackie Cooper down here on Broadway on a Saturday afternoon. And that's not really what we're preparing you to do. We do use some of the same skills that you're going to use in selling retail or business to consumer selling, but most of our students go on to careers in the business to business context. And so it's one of those things that's really, really interesting. Everybody sells, whether you think about it or not. You sell yourself constantly. You want people to like you, and a lot of these skills are applicable to other contexts in life as well. And we'll look at social styles probably next week. We'll do an exercise on social styles and where people are in this class in social styles and how you can communicate better with other people. And that's part of selling too. So sales skills are transferable to other contexts. Politicians, as I put up here, use sales to persuade voters and bureaucrats to do what they want. When Dwight David Eisenhower was elected to the presidency, he followed Harry S. Truman. Truman had been FDR's vice president. FDR is the only president to have served more than 2 terms. He was elected to 4. He died in his 4th term. Truman becomes president, and then he gets elected in his own right. Nobody thought Truman was actually going to get elected. In fact, they did a poll at the time, and it showed Truman seriously down in the numbers among voters. It was a telephone poll, and a lot has been written about that election and that poll. And there's a famous photograph of Truman smiling and holding up a paper that says, "Dewey defeats Truman." The paper had jumped the gun, and when the final results came in, Truman squeaked by and won a term in his own right. He's succeeded by Dwight David Eisenhower, who had been a general, the Supreme Allied Commander during World War 2, and he said, poor Ike, he's going to be the most frustrated man in America because he'll say, do this and do that, and nothing will happen. And that's true. If you're a general and you tell your troops, jump, their only answer, their only response should be, how high, sir, right? But the civilian bureaucracy doesn't work the same way, and so it requires the president to really be a persuader in chief to try and get things done, because the bureaucracy stays. Politicians come and go, presidents come and go, and the bureaucracy stays the same. And he also has to deal with Congress and the courts, and so these skills are very applicable to that context. Friends try to influence each other, and family relationships involve persuasion. If you want to do something, you try to talk your parents when you were a little kid into letting you go do whatever it is that you wanted to do, and you were using sales skills to do that. So it's something that is highly applicable to all kinds of fields in life, and everybody does sell something, if nothing else than selling your labor to an employer. Why are salespeople paid so well? Why do we have so many of our students that go on to making lots and lots of money? Most of my students have gone on now and are making, $250,000 a year, 2 or 3 years out. Why is that? What is the value of salespeople? New products particularly require people to explain them when they come on the market. I have a sister-in-law who sells medical devices, and that's what a lot of our students want to do. They want to go into medical device sales because it's sort of sexy. They want to go to work for Stryker or J&J or something like that. She sells a device currently that is a minimally invasive biopsy device for breast cancer screening. And she actually goes into the hospital operating suites with doctors and shows them how to operate the device. Because although she's not a doctor, she's trained on the device and they're not. She can't touch the device when it's actually in a real patient, but she can show them and explain to them how the device works in order to gather the biopsy tissue for breast cancer screening. And so devices like that are coming up and being invented every single day. And so these things require someone to actually sit there and explain it to you and show you how to do things. Sales is important to any organization. Organizations fundamentally, even if they're nonprofits, have to draw in enough money to survive. And business organizations not only want to survive, but they want to grow, and sales is the fundamental component of that. You're going to sell products, and so it's absolutely critical to any organization. So what is it that salespeople do? Well, they identify potential customers and needs. This is what we call prospecting. And this is probably, for most of our sales students, one of the hardest things. If you read a book in sales, almost all of the books in sales, and this is a good test question, say that the most difficult part of sales is being told no. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of our students don't want to go into sales. I mean, other than they have this idea of what a salesman is, and that idea generally involves having been on a car lot and purchased a car, and I'm sure that all of you in this class at some point in time have purchased a car, right? We live in a state where you can't get around on public transportation very easily. And so you've probably gone and you probably purchased a car, and it was probably a horrific experience. Next to your house, your car is probably the second largest purchase that many of you will make. And there's always a feeling with a car, unlike a house. When you buy a house, particularly now, if you bought a house, what's happening to property values all across the country? They're skyrocketing. Why are they skyrocketing? Who said skyrocketing? Why are they skyrocketing?
I guess really kind of goes with the market right now, how everybody's buying things, like properties. People are, also what's really going on is a lot of rental properties. Everybody's trying to find second ways of incomes.
Right.
As well, the current population and people moving to the country want to have a house.
Yeah, and a lot of people during COVID, saved all this money because they couldn't go anywhere or do anything. You know, they saved an enormous amount of money. You're eating in, you're not going out. And all of a sudden they decided that they wanted a better house or a bigger house. And they had all this cash that they could use to buy a house. And their house property was probably increasing, and so they could get a really good deal. I have some friends of mine, it's a couple, and the wife is like a social junkie. Likes to go out and likes to go out to dinner and drinks and stuff like that. She works in HR, and every Friday and Saturday night they go out to dinner with people. During COVID, I'm better friends with a husband in this dyad. They were saving something like $2,500 a month because that's how much she spent in going out to drinks on Wednesday. You know, there's Wednesday night and there's Friday night and Saturday. I mean, it was just like incredible. And so they have all this money. What are you going to do with it? Well, buy their house. Cars are not that way, except for right now. Cars are actually, you can sell your car. I've had an offer on my car for more money than I paid for it on my truck, because nobody can get large trucks right now because all of the chips are being held up and they're, you know, sitting on a container ship off the coast of California or New York or somewhere. But generally speaking, in normal times, property values do increase in value, but cars are one of those things that the minute you buy it, you know it's a depreciating asset, that it's probably not going to be worth what it, the minute you drive it off the lot, what it is at the time you bought it. And so you have this negative idea about salespeople and what it is that they do. I had to go to Mathis Brothers. That's another one that most people in this state have had some experience with. I had to go to Mathis Brothers, and our sales center, by the way, so this is a shameless plug for our sales center, is sponsored by Bob Mills. And anybody know what Bob Mills' slogan is now? What his current marketing slogan is?
Change. I thought it was Bob Mills Sleep Spa.
He does have the Bob Mills Sleep Spa, but his major, he's gone, I'll just leave that open. Although my colleagues tell me my voice carries, that's why I shut it. I generally think I should leave the door open so that everybody can have access to the knowledge that I'm, you know, spewing forth here. But a lot of them have complained because they say that I have a booming voice or something. I don't. But anyway, Bob Mills' current slogan, when I was a kid growing up, it was Bob Mills, the working man's friend. And he's actually trademarked that. He's trademarked a whole lot of stuff. His current one is no shopper stalkers. And they're pretty good about that. They will greet you at the front door and say, if you have any questions, please let me know. But they do not follow you around. I had to go to Mathis Brothers because we're redoing some rooms in the bed and breakfast, and I needed some new mattresses and things like that. And it was, I mean, it's like you go through Mathis Brothers and you try not to make eye contact with anybody for fear that they will just, like, you know, attach themselves to you and follow you around. And it's a horrific experience. And so I think that's what a lot of people have in their mind, that that's what sales is. And it's not necessarily about that. It's about, you know, business to business and identifying potential customers and their needs, determining how we're going to satisfy those needs, providing them with information on products and services. And salespeople are also, in many respects, the eyes and ears of the company. They see what the trends are. When I worked in industry for the American Education Corporation, our salespeople were the ones who knew what our competition was doing, because they were the ones that would go into schools that had the competition and would try to take over those accounts. So they were the ones who knew what sort of the up and coming trends are. And so again, in the early ages of online education, which I started teaching online many years ago, was, you know, one of the reasons I first got hired was because they thought that I could teach online, because it's like, oh, he's young and he knows, you know, something about computers, which I knew nothing about computers, but I figured I could figure it out. It was really a glorified correspondence course. And now we have all of these learning management systems that do all kinds of stuff. Not only can we provide content on the learning management system and assessments, we can actually do prescriptive evaluation for students. And that's one of the things our software did, was it would track students' progress and be prescriptive in providing the instructor with recommendations on what to do next with students that were achieving at, above, or below grade level. So compensation for salespeople is generally higher. Sales is one of the few, if not the only profession that you can name your salary. One of my friends, Adam, who, again, we have a restaurant in the Stone Lion Inn, and we buy stuff from US Foods, and he was our rep for a lot of years, this guy named Adam. And he said, I decided I wanted to take my family to Disney World. And I figured out what it was going to cost to go to Disney World, to Florida for a week and do all that. And not just Disney World, but Universal Studios and SeaWorld and all of those things. And he said, I figured that at that point in time, I bet it's more expensive now, based on where he wanted to stay. He wanted to stay on property, and he wanted to stay at, one of the nicer resorts. It was going to cost him between $5,000 and $7,000 for his family for a week. And so he said, I figured out how much more I had to sell every week to make that happen. And that's what I did. I just set a goal to sell that much more product and make it happen. So it's one of the few where not only is compensation higher because of their value, but you can actually set your compensation. So the positive nature of sales. Sales is a critical function in a market economy. Why is it that so many people don't want to go into sales? They want to get a business degree, they don't want to go into sales. Again, because we've had these negative experiences at Mathis Brothers or on the car lot. Also, people love to buy. We love to buy. One of the things that we know is that the same part of your brain that is triggered when you eat the cookie or you have the can of Red Bull, the pleasure part of the brain is triggered also when you buy. But people hate to be sold. But it's still an enormously important part of our market economy. And again, particularly with complex devices like medical devices, you really need salespeople who can train people and show them the value of these new and innovative products. What would be an advantage, for example, of my sister-in-law's less invasive biopsy procedure device that her company has manufactured? What would be an advantage of that for a doctor?
Takes less time.
Takes less time, and you can see more patients, which means that you can make more money. It also means that if you have the latest thing, you can market that, and you can market it as less painful, less invasive, less downtime, right? I mean, these are all things that you can add, and salespeople can point these things out. So what is required for success in sales? Personal integrity and ethical standards. Now, if we go back in time and we look at and we think about those marketing philosophies that I talked about at the beginning of the semester, we start out with the oldest philosophy, which is if you build it, they will come. It's just if you have something that's a little bit better than what came before, people will buy it because goods and services were so scarce for most of human history that it really didn't require a whole lot to sell stuff. People had a need for things. As we came together in communities, you needed more and more things to sort of survive and get along. But they were scarce, and so you didn't need a whole lot of sales. But that ends with the Industrial Revolution and this massive amounts of produced goods, right? Large numbers of produced goods. And so they started hiring massive sales forces at that period of time. And the idea was just, get some attention, create a desire, get a marketing decision, and then move on down the road. Right? The AIDA model: awareness, interest, desire, action. And that was successful for a long period of time but when products didn't work well, people became frustrated. And as more and more competitors entered the market and you could differentiate between better quality goods and lesser quality goods, those people who clung to that older model lost out. Ultimately, because there wasn't a whole lot of personal integrity. So ethical standards are really important in sales. You do not want to lie. And if you think about this, and again, one of the things I've tried to do, and a theme throughout this class has been, how can this be personally applicable to you? I suggested to you that you tailor your resume to every single job that you apply for. And I gave you examples of that. When I applied for jobs here at UCO, when I was applying for jobs at R1 institutions, they don't care about teaching. In fact, did I tell you that why I didn't get my PhD at OU? So I have this like visceral hatred of OU. I mean, like just like visceral hatred. The first year of college, I went to OU with my friends, and we were all very excited and very young and, you know, eager to learn and get a degree and get on with our lives. And I walked into my first class at OU, and it was in an auditorium of 350 people. And I hadn't graduated with 350 people. I graduated with like 200 people. I knew everybody's name in my graduating class. And I mean, I knew their parents. I mean, everything about them, because I wanted to be a politician. And so, I mean, this is overwhelming. Like, you're in this little auditorium, and the professor who's still there, and I used to see him when I was a political scientist at the Oklahoma Political Science Association's annual conference. His name was Alan Hertzke, and he walks to the front of the class and he says, this is probably, it's a Monday, the fall semester. And he says, this is your first class in your first semester. It was an 8 a.m. class. So he was, you know, right. Most of us had not had a class before then. Although we used to have classes at 7 a.m. here at UCO. I used to love to teach those classes at 7 a.m. And now I can't get students to take 7 a.m. classes. They'll barely take an 8 a.m. class. So anyway, he walks to the front of the class. He says, so this is your first class. I think it's incumbent upon me to educate you as to what it is I am here for and where you are on my priority list. And he said, I am an assistant professor. I have 5 years to publish 5 major articles and get a book deal. And therefore, if you think I'm here to help you, you're wrong. Because in order to get tenure and promoted here at OU, you have to publish your parish. And he said, I know that, so for 2 50-minute periods a week, on Monday and Wednesday, we met in the big class. And then on the Friday, we met with graduate assistants that were supposed to, like, you know, help us with any questions that we might have and the papers that we were going to write and stuff like that in this class. And he said, if you think that any of them are here to help you, you're wrong. They're all working on their PhDs, and they're completely and utterly stressed out. And so don't be relying on them. And with that, he ended the lecture. So years later, when I decided I wanted to get my PhD, come back to higher education, I went down to OU because I didn't want to leave Oklahoma. I had a nice house in Edgemere Park, and I wanted to stay here. And our associate dean here in the College of Business was an OU grad, and he said, I'll put a good word in for you. So I go down and I talk to the chair of the marketing department, and she said 2 things that made my blood absolutely run cold. The first thing she said is, well, I hope you're interested in logistics, because that's what we are. We're a logistics program. And I thought, yuck, I can't imagine anything more boring than logistics. If you're interested in that, by the way, we have a scholar in our department who graduated from OU in their logistics program. And he is fantastic and he loves it. And he can, like, talk to you about channels marketing all day long. A lot of students actually are interested in that here, because a lot of our companies hire people who are interested in logistics. Why is that? We're in the middle of the country. We're a big transportation hub. When they talk about, for example, midstream marketing of oil, which we have a lot of midstream oil companies, marketing is not like selling, it's actually logistics. That's what they mean by midstream marketing. So if you go to Cushing, that is the pipeline crossroads of America. And I just thought, yeah, if you go, there's like all these tanks and stuff like that. I just thought, yeah, I don't want to do that. And then the second thing she said is, I see you've been teaching for a long time. And I said, yep, sure have. And she said, well, Grant, teaching is something that one must endure in order to do research, particularly undergraduate teaching. And I thought, maybe I don't want to get my PhD from OU. I mean, not interested in logistics and also pretty interested in teaching. And so I decided that was a negative sell for me in terms of I did not want to be there, right? It was a complete and utter, the first experience I had at OU was a complete and utter negative sell. Don't bother me. I'm not here to help you. I'm here to do this thing. And then my second one was a complete and utter negative sell, which was teaching was something that we have to endure. So, but they were honest about it, I have to say. They were absolutely honest. And so I guess they had high ethical standards. Personality structure is important in sales. Every textbook in sales will tell you, and this is one of the things that I disagree with, every textbook in sales will tell you that salespeople are made, they are not born. And I totally disagree with that. I think there are people that are naturally extroverted who like to talk to people, and you can make them better at sales, but they're probably going to be pretty good. And I use my brother's best friend. This is an anecdotal example, but it's an example by analogy, which is still valid. His father was John Vance. His name is Garrett Vance. He was my brother's best friend all through grade school, junior high, and then high school. And his stepbrother was my best friend. And Garrett was just like his dad. He was constantly selling. I mean, I would have to tell the kid all the time, stop, Garrett, stop conning me, stop selling me, right? Like, just like put it away for a while. If you're extraordinarily introverted and you hate people and you love accounting and you just want to sit there with an Excel spreadsheet and work on double entry bookkeeping, I probably can't help you. And you probably need to be an accountant. I will pray for your immortal soul because I can't imagine anything worse than being an accountant. But, I'm not sure that I can help you. Now, there are what I call the bubble, which are the vast majority of people are in the bubble. They're not necessarily born salespeople, but, they're enough of a social creature that we can make them better. So you have to have the right personality structure. You have to have a positive self-image and perseverance because you're going to hear no a lot. And that is one of the hardest things for salespeople to deal with. Although I think probably prospecting is actually harder. You have to have the ability to cultivate and maintain relationships. There is an age-old adage that says that you shouldn't mix business with pleasure. You shouldn't be friends with the people that you do business with. That's not exactly true. We want to build relationships, and this goes back to ethical standards and going back to the difference between that older model of selling and the newer model of selling, which is the older model was about let's get their money and let's move on down the road. And there's lots of other people out there that we're going to sell to in the future. This is the sales model that I talked about that they use at the Oklahoma State Fair, right? They get some interest, they get a desire, and they get you to buy the ShamWow or whatever it is that they are selling at that moment. That's not the case with, in particular, business-to-business relationships, where these tend to be long-term. One of the things that happened, and this is not a political statement, this is just a statement of fact. When Donald Trump said trade wars are easy to win, when you disrupt the supply chain, those are long-term relationships that we have in order to get goods and services that we want. And when you disrupt that, it becomes enormously difficult to fix it. And these relationships in the business to business context are oftentimes very, very long term. And so, you know, you don't necessarily want to marry everybody that you're trying to sell to, but you do have to maintain a relationship, at least a working friendship with these people, because you're going to rely on them over and over and over again. So you have to have the ability to cultivate and maintain relationships. Again, and there are people who are just not good at making friends. They always have like one friend, and that's there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying it's harder for them to be successful in sales. And then personal abilities. You have to have intellectual development and empathy in order to be really successful at sales. Now, is it possible to truly be empathetic? I always tell students, I know that students think that college professors are like Venus born of the foam, and that we never experienced what it was like to be you. But I always tell students, as somebody who has 2 bachelors, a master's, a Juris Doctorate, and a PhD, I've spent a lot of time on that side of the desk. And so I have a lot of empathy for you, but I don't necessarily have a lot of sympathy. Right? Students say things like, I overslept. Dog ate my homework. How did the dog eat your homework? It's on D2L. It should be on an electronic device at this point in time. I have a lot of empathy, but can you really have empathy? Can you really ever understand what it is to be somebody else? That's really hard. We really can't. It's hard to imagine being anyone other than yourself, right? But to the extent that it's possible, we should have empathy. And there are people who are completely incapable of this. And again, these are probably maybe in the short term be successful as salespeople, but in the long term, they're not. Now, there are a category of people that psychiatrists and psychologists have identified, although these terms are not listed in the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual 5, which is what they use to categorize and classify mental disorders, right? And it changes. We're in the 5th edition or the 5th volume of this. But there are 2 categories of people that, although they are not listed the last time I checked, and I have a DSM-4, so I don't know. I don't think I've looked at the DSM-5, but I've been told by my friends who are in psychology that they're not in the DSM-5. There are 2 categories that many psychiatrists, psychologists believe are useful in describing certain characteristics of personality types, and there's psychopathology and sociopathology, right? Psychopaths are people who may become serial killers. My mother is fascinated by this. We do murder mysteries at the Line Inn, so she writes murder mysteries, so she's always fascinated by serial killers. If I have to watch one more program about a serial killer, I think I'm going to scream, pull my hair out and go crazy. The other is sociopath. There's been a book written fairly recently called The Sociopath Next Door. And sociopaths can be actually highly productive, and they can be highly successful. They also have very little ability to empathize with people. And that's why in the long term, they are not necessarily capable of doing well in sales. In the short term, they can fake it, but because they can't really empathize and they don't really value other people's emotions, that they may not be terribly successful in the long term at sales, because if you cannot understand where your client is, you can't fix it if something happens, right? If something goes wrong with the product or service that you can't necessarily fix it because you don't have the ability to relate. The basics of professional sales. So it begins with prospecting. Again, this is the part that I think is the hardest for most sales students because it's lonely. Most sales students are extroverts. They tend to like people, they like talking, they like going out, they like making presentations. They are the ones that are absolutely willing to get up and give a speech. That's another reason I think a lot of people shy away from professional sales. I knew the first time I taught a class, the first class I taught in the fall semester 27 years ago or whatever it was, I walked into my first class and I stood up and I started talking and I thought, this is great. I always tell my students that I wanted to be a country and western superstar, but I'm a tone deaf flat baritone, so I had to become a college professor instead. I have absolutely no inhibitions when it comes to getting up and talking in front of people. I love karaoke. My friends, like if there is a karaoke bar within 100 miles, I will find it and we will be there. And my friends, they just hate it, because it's like, they know that I'm going to be like up there and I'm horrible. I mean, I have, you can look at my YouTube videos. I have YouTube videos of me singing karaoke, but I have no shame. And so I have absolutely, all of this, the ability to get up and speak in front of people. That's another reason that I think that most people don't like sales, because they don't like giving presentations, particularly in business-to-business context where you're going to give presentations to not just one person, but maybe to a whole team of people, to a whole, corporate division or something like that. And there's just an absolute fear of it. The part that most salespeople don't like is prospecting, this needs identifying, because it doesn't involve that. It's lonely, hard work. It's the research that goes into finding customers and figuring out what their social styles are that is really important, but it's lonely. It's something that you can't do it as a team project, really. It's just, you've got this territory and you've got to figure out who it is that you're going to see and why you're going to see them and how you're going to get them to buy your product. It involves things like if you're going to sell to governments, like lots of people want to sell to UCO. Why do they want to sell to UCO? If you manufacture lots of stuff, like light bulbs, for example, we use an astronomical amount of light bulbs. It looks like there are several light bulbs out in this classroom. We buy a lot of that. And you're going to get paid if you sell to UCO, because there's no bankruptcy for a state agency. So you're going to get your money. Whereas businesses go broke all the time and you may not get your money. Donald Trump has done this several times. He's gone bankrupt 3 or 4 times. And each time, all of those people that provided contracts and services to him became unsecured creditors in the bankruptcy. And if you're an unsecured creditor in bankruptcy, what does that mean that you're going to get generally? Nothing. You're going to get nothing out of the bankruptcy. UCO can't do that. So people want to sell. But it's not just about selling to one person, right? There's only one person or 2 people on this campus that can sign a contract for over $5,000. But it's going to have to be going through all of these other gatekeepers. And that takes a lot of time to figure it out. It takes a lot of research to figure out the government contracting process. And it's, again, lonely work. What else do salespeople do? Assisting potential customers in recognizing and defining needs. Recognizing what it is that they are going to need and defining those. In the early age of online education, you had to convince universities who had historically, and we still had a department in this college until very recently, marketing had one of the first all online degree programs. And it took us a long time to get there in the college because in order to get any business degree, you have to have accounting. And the accounting department under the previous department chair, who retired about, I guess, 5 years ago, insisted that there was no way that accounting could ever be taught online. You just cannot teach accounting online. That was just her stand. You just absolutely cannot teach accounting online. I think like accounting is one of those things that is absolutely prime for being taught online. Why?
Spreadsheets.
Yeah, there's objective, like right and wrong answers to this. It's a, you know, debits on the left, credits on the right, unless you're thinking, right? In which case they reverse it. But it's like, it's objective. It's not about relationship building. It's about basic math. I think that's like absolutely can be taught online, but she just insisted like that you can't. So getting that department to understand the value, for example, of D2L and the online platform that it provides and the market is what salespeople can do. Then providing solutions to meet those needs. And then persuading customers to make a decision and to use a product or service. And this is the, you know, once you've got them convinced that they need the product, once we decided as an institution that online education was going to be the way that we needed to go, then you have selection choices, right? And again, higher education is very slow to change. Historically, the idea was that you came and you listened to the lectures and you got educated, right? And that's the way it was. That's the way it had been done since the medieval period. That you know, that you went and you listened to people talk, you wrote down, you took notes, and and you took a test, and that's the way it was done. So higher education in general was very slow to adopt this model. But once they did, it sort of took off. Now we have choices in these various products and services. So who can we use? Well, I've used almost every learning management system out there. There's something called Blackboard. There's a Google product. There's Moodle. You know, there's D2L.
Isn't it Canvas?
Canvas, yeah, I'd forgotten about Canvas. I think they're still around, but I'm not sure. Canvas was another horrible product, kind of like D2L. So you've got all of these.
Better than D2L.
What?
Canvas is better than D2L.
That's sort of like saying I'd rather perform, you know, an appendectomy on myself versus I would rather take out my tonsil. I mean, like,
They're both terrible.
oh,
but
they're terrible.
Canvas was easier to figure out than D2L.
That's true. So I will tell you that from an instructor's perspective, D2L is absolutely horrible. I mean, it is like one of the most horrible interfaces that I've ever had to deal with in terms of trying to create content in D2L. Do you know why we ended up with D2L?
No.
Because the IT department, D2L is really easy to fix on the back end. It's really easy to manage from an IT perspective. And they just absolutely insisted that that's what we had to have. We had to have D2L because it was the easiest thing. It's like, oh, let's not worry about our customers or the people who produce, you know, the stuff for our customers. Let's just worry about IT. I mean, like, IT exists for its own sake? No. You know, your staff, you're not lying. But they just don't get that. So you got to try and convince people. And how did they convince us to get D2L? Well, they convinced the IT department that this was going to be the cheapest, easiest, and it is. From an IT perspective, it is really, really easy to use. So convincing products or customers to make the decision to use your product or service once they've identified those needs, when there are competing services out there. If you have a monopoly, you don't have that problem, right? You don't need a whole lot of sales. Oklahoma Natural Gas doesn't have to do a whole lot in terms of selling, right? People, they have a monopoly in the areas in which they exist. They don't have to go out and convince people to buy natural gas because they're it. That's all there is. If you live in Edmond, you have no choice. You have to buy electric from Edmond Electric. You have to get your water from the city of Edmond. Those are monopolies, and they don't need a whole lot of selling or convincing because we all need those products and services, and you don't have any selection choice in those. I've got to go see if I can get my aunt out of the hospital, so that is a good place to stop on this slide. I will get a picture. If you got ducks, come see me. And I apologize for having to let you go early. If you feel cheated, you give me a call on my cell phone and I'll talk calmly and softly to you all the way back to Guthrie, where you can come in, next week to my office and I'll sit there and reassure you about all of the things that you should be doing in order to become a better salesperson. All right? So if you got ducks, come see me. Let me stop the video. Live feed.